Okay, so now we're going to start chapter 2, which is the structure of matter and the chemical elements, and that's chapter 2 in the chemistry first version of the textbook. And if you buy the hard copy of the textbook, that's chapter 2. So the hard copy of the textbook is designed to go along with the chemistry first version. So I'm usually going to start off with an outline, just so that you guys have an idea of what I'm going to cover on that day. Anything written in black, you guys might want to, and you can't really tell if it's black or blue on these screens, okay? I'll work on that. You might want to write down as notes if you're a note taker, okay? The goals are going to be in green, okay? That's sort of when we're done this section, this is what you should be able to do. These are the questions you should be able to answer. And then the rest of the notes I'm kind of just going to go. So the way the tablet works is that it's essentially a Blackboard lecture, where instead of writing on the whiteboard or the blackboard, it's on the tablet so that I can post notes after the fact. So however you're used to taking a course, okay, you guys can feel free to use your style that would mesh with a blackboard or a whiteboard type talk. So, and if I find that it's not working because it's tough to see that, and I'll make the font maybe a little bit bigger, even though this is 24 font on my computer, I'll enlarge that. And if you find it's not working, okay, I could switch to PowerPoint. I just don't really like PowerPoint for this course because I think it's a really good habit to get into taking notes and writing things down because you remember it a lot more and people will pay attention, I think, more to a PowerPoint lecture. There are PowerPoint slides available in the course website. If you're a PowerPoint person, there's those slides available. Okay, so the outline we're going to go over, I'm just going to talk about some study skills. Okay, we're going to cover kinetic molecular theory, and that's probably as far as we're going to get today. And then we're going to, next class, we'll start the periodic table of the elements, and we're going to do some atomic structure covering the subatomic particles. So that's probably where we're going to get to today. Okay. Stop me if I go too fast, but I do still have to cover the material in a timely fashion. Okay. So just how to approach the study of chemistry. So there's this little quote, discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishments. Okay. At this point, I usually go into a little spiel about, think of this as if you guys were athletes. I find most of the time I have a lot of kinesiology students in the course, and they can relate to that. You can't just get good at playing a sport if you're not naturally gifted, which some of us are. Yay for those people. Not everybody is. Even if you're not naturally athletic, super gifted, you can still do the drills, run the circuits, do all of the work required to get good at something. Okay? You may never be an expert, but you will get good at it if you put the time into it. Okay? So the assignments that are posted on the Nexus course site are designed, so there's assignments and then just exercises. The exercises are designed as practice. If you don't practice, you won't get it. Okay? Unless you're just one of those people who can read it once and you're good to go. Okay? That's great, but you need to practice because the term test is going to be designed, there's going to be enough time, but you need to be able to read the question and do the question, read the question, do the question, and that's all repetition. Okay? So just like an athlete would have to do drills, scientists, chemists, students, so this is going to apply to all of your courses, you have to do the work to get the payoff. Okay, that's all what this is. So for those of you doing the video on demand lecture at home, try and not be on Facebook at the same time, and usually I'll mention to my class students at the same kind of thing. If you're doing the exercises or watching the videos or doing the notes, don't do a question, like something on Facebook. Do a question, check your email. Do a question, send a text message. That's not good studying. And I know it happens because I do it. Okay? I have fallen into that trap. I'll be preparing my notes, and I'll be multitasking, I'll be doing a couple of things at a time, and then I find it takes me way too long to do my notes. And you guys will notice the next day if I've been multitasking while I'm working on my lecture prep, okay? Because it's gonna be a little scattered, okay? Studying is the same way. Get yourself a space, make it your own, figure out what works best for you for studying, and continue down that path, okay? Some people need to rewrite their notes over and over and over again. Some people need to use different resources. So you'd listen to the audiobook or you'd look at the PowerPoint slides online. Do the exercises. When you've done the exercises, check the answer key. Do them again. Okay, they're going to be the same questions, but it's all about repetition and learning how to just make those connections in your brain so that you can see something and do it immediately. Okay, so that's the whole use your time efficiently, blah, blah, blah. There's your other use available resources. So this isn't really lecture notes. You don't have to copy this down if you don't want to. And the whole commit to improvement thing would be, because this is a 0 level course, I often find, like I said at the very beginning, the attendance rate is quite low. Given that it's an 8:30 lecture, I'm expecting it to be less. Also, because it's a video on demand course, I'm going to take it a little bit less personally this time around, because if you're not here, I'm just going to assume that you're watching the videos online on your own time, not at 8:30 in the morning. It's when it's more convenient for you, and that's great. So this time around, I won't take it as personally when people don't show up for class, because I'm thinking that's going to happen. But do please still keep up with the video on demand portions. And my spring course taught the same way, same tests, same assignments, nobody failed. And when I was grading things, I was like, wow, this is a really smart group of people. They're getting A+ on things. They're getting A+ on things and nobody failed because it was a spring course and it was the only thing they had to do. Okay, so this one I find on the priority list of courses is generally at the bottom because it's just a prep course. It's a 0 level course. Okay, that might work against you come the final exam. So even though it's a 0 level course, it's still going to go on your transcript. Please still take it seriously. Okay, but in this particular instance, class, I guess, is not mandatory because you guys have the video on demand portion. Okay. So then we get into the actual lecture material. I'll stop lecturing you. Okay. So what is chemistry? Okay. It's the study of the structure and behavior of matter. And I should actually get my notes out here. Okay. So some of it's going to be handwritten ahead of time. Some of it is going to be written out during class. Okay. So study of behavior of matter. Okay. So the key thing there is, what is matter? Okay. So this would be, the universe is made up of matter and energy. Okay, I'll try and write a little bit bigger. Okay. So the universe is made up of matter and energy. Once again, we're still focusing on matter. Okay, so we'd get the, oh, that's not what I want. Okay, then we get what is matter? Okay, so matter is all of the physical substances around us. I'm already noticing this is going to be really boring for video on demand people. Sorry, we'll figure something out. If you want to record notes as if you were in class, that probably is the best use of your time if you're only watching it on the video. And I need way more space now. Okay, so matter is all of the physical substances around us. It is anything that has mass and takes up space. Okay, so anything with mass and space. And matter is made up of tiny particles known as atoms, which you may be familiar with. So matter is made up of tiny particles known as atoms, okay, which hopefully you're familiar with or you've heard of atoms before. Okay, and then we would include here, atoms are the smallest whole particle of matter. Okay, so as chemists, we're going to talk a lot about atoms. Just to give you a picture idea, okay, so here we have, okay, macroscopic, so things that are visible, things that you can see. Macro would be big, okay, so you've got people, paper, wedding rings, CDs, and then they get smaller to when we need a microscope to see them. Okay, so anybody who plans on taking biology, you're going to end up doing a lot of microscope work. So you've got cells, okay, plant, animal, bacterial cell. And then we get to things that you can't see with a microscope, definitely not with the naked eye. And we get to particulate matter. Okay, so particulate matter, you've got viruses, molecules, and then we get down to atoms fall into the particulate matter. Okay, we're not worried about the actual sizes or listing any of this. It's just a diagram so that you guys can see just how small we're talking. Okay, and then of course now, when we get to that section, we also have subatomic particles that we know about. Okay, so physics has taken us to the realm of being able to see the different particles within the atom. So we've got the protons, neutrons, quarks, bosons, all of that. I'm not a physicist, so I'm going to stop there before I say something incorrect. Okay, but we can even go smaller than what's on this picture. Now, how scientists normally approach things, and this is sort of how the scientific method works, is a scientist is going to do an experiment. Okay, they're going to try something out. They're going to make some observations. Okay, and based on those observations, they're going to draw some conclusions. Okay, so you do the experiment, you see what happens, make the observations, you use what you currently know about the subject, and you make some conclusions. Those conclusions then turn into theories. Okay, so these conclusions become theories, okay, and that's based off experimental evidence. So a lot of what I'm going to be explaining to you, and a lot of what chemistry is back in the day, okay, long, long ago, somebody was messing around in the lab, they mixed a couple things together, they made some observations, and then from those observations came the scientific theory that we know today. And that's generally how it's done. Some of it is theoretical to begin with, but most of it is based on experimental observation. So if you're one of those people who likes to know why things are the way they are and where did that theory come from, there's usually an experiment behind it, okay, or some history, which I'm not going to go into. So history of science is actually quite an interesting course if you're needing to take a different science credit if you're an arts major. So I'm not going to go into the history, but that's generally where things come from, is all experimental based. And it's all these theories that arise from these experiments, okay? And the theory is just a set of ideas, and they change. So we used to have the idea of an atom being the nucleus in the middle and then sort of satellites as electrons around that, right? That was the accepted theory for the structure of an atom, okay? That's not what an atom looks like. We know that now because our experimental method improved and we were able to delve a little bit deeper, make better observations, and then the theory evolved because now we know more. We can do better experiments. So this is usually where I say, everything I tell you in this course, when you take first year chemistry, you're going to find out that it wasn't quite true. And then if you were to take a second year course, you find out that everything they told you in first year is not quite true. And then so on and so forth. And that's only because we can't go into the very serious, current, up-to-date structure of the atom first thing, because we need to ease you into it. So it's not that I'm lying to you, I'm just simplifying things. And you'll, as you go, and this is gonna happen in pretty much all of your courses throughout university, it's always gonna build on things. So we're not misleading you, we're just simplifying things a little bit. So if you happen to know that what I'm teaching is the very simplified model, okay, I'm doing that on purpose. It's not that I'm withholding information until you're ready for it, is basically how it goes, okay? And so theories can evolve. So just keep that in mind. We used to think the world was flat. We know it's not. But at the time, the powers that be, the smartest people, thought that the world was flat, okay? That turns out not to be the case. That theory has evolved over time, okay? So I'm gonna introduce you to one theory, and that's what we're gonna cover today. And it's going to be, so you can write this down now. Okay, so today we're going to cover kinetic molecular theory. Okay, and this in green here, and like I said, I'll make this a little bit larger next time, is the goal for this portion. Okay, so you want to be able to identify and explain the differences between solids, liquids, and gases, okay? Materials that you are familiar with, okay? But we are going to describe them in terms of volume and shape, and we're going to consider particle movement and the interactions between the particles. So at the end of the day, you should be able to read the notes and somehow describe solids, liquids, and gases in terms of interactions between particles, and the volume and shape of the particles. Okay, so kinetic molecular theory may sound a little bit complicated. Okay, kinetic is the study of movement. Okay, so you either have potential energy, which is the potential to move or do work. Kinetic would be you're already moving. Okay, so this would be, we can say that's moving. Molecular, okay, we're studying molecules. So this is the theory of moving molecules, okay? Which if we're going to complicate things, we're going to call it kinetic molecular theory. Okay, so there's always a simplification whenever something sounds more complicated than it needs to be. So the kinetic molecular theory, so this is a model used to describe solids, liquids, and gases. Which these are your three physical states of matter. We also have plasma, but we're not talking about plasmas. So here again, we're going to focus on just these three, okay? But I know plasma and superfluids exist. So those are your three physical states of matter, okay? So we're going to describe, okay, so there's a couple, so usually there's a couple of rules or guidelines for every theory. The rules for this one is that all matter is composed of tiny particles. Which we kind of already went over. All matter is composed of tiny particles. All particles are in constant motion. Everything is moving all of the time. And the amount of motion is related to temperature. Okay. Temperature, when we're talking about chemistry, is a form of energy. Okay, so we need to apply this to solids, liquids, and gases. Okay, so if we're talking about solids, liquids, gases, okay, the key difference between these three physical states of matter is in the motion of the particles. So the key differences, okay, the amount of motion of the particles, okay, and the attractive forces between the particles. So how much they're able to move and how closely they're attracted or how strongly they're attracted to one another. Okay, those are the key differences between the atoms or particles in solids, liquids, and gases. So now this is designed to be interactive. So the video on demand students who are watching this at home, anybody who's not in class watching this at home, maybe just try and play along. So talk to your computer screen, I guess, is the best how it's going to go. I'm going to have to make some modifications to how I teach eventually. Okay, so we're going to talk about solids. Okay, so I'm just going to draw circles close together. Just do a grid, like 5 by 3. Okay, this is an example of the particles in a solid, where each circle is a particle. From here on in, I'm going to use the words particles and atoms interchangeably. Okay, a particle is an atom is a particle. Okay, they go back and forth. Okay, so here's your solids. Okay, each particle, okay, based on one of the rules for the theory, is in constant motion. So these arrows would just represent motion of the particle. Okay, switch to blue here. We also have attractive forces between the particles. Okay, so each one of those particles is moving, and there are attractive forces between the particles. What do we know? And we're always going to be, for this kinetic molecular theory, we're going to be discussing it in terms of volume and shape. Okay, so what do we know about the shape of a solid? Is it constant or variable? This is where you guys would yell out that it's constant. Okay, which this is, you don't need the microphone, just yell out that it's constant. Okay, so here the shape of a solid is constant. What do we know about the volume of a solid? Is it constant or variable? Constant. So in terms of shape and volume, solids are constant. And that is because, okay, the attractive forces between the particles are, okay, so the attractive forces between the particles are strong. Okay, they are so strong that the movement of the particles, okay, can't overcome that attractive force. So this particular particle, okay, so say it's moving down, it wants to go down. Okay, it has kinetic energy, but it cannot overcome the attractive force between it and its neighboring particles, which gives you the properties of constant shape and volume. Okay, so that's a description of a solid in terms of kinetic molecular theory. The interactions are, the attractive forces are so strong that they are not overcome by the motion of the particles. Okay, so you don't get any movement. Now, if we were to do the same thing but for a liquid, So we're going to draw that same grid. So just draw your 5x3 grid. Okay. Once again, okay, these particles are in constant motion. And we have attractive forces between the particles. But what do we know about the shape and the volume of liquids? Okay, so what did we do last time? First, shape. Okay, so the shape of a liquid, is it constant or variable? It's variable. See, you guys know this stuff. We're just using what you already know, and I'm explaining it to you with this scientific theory. So the shape of a liquid is variable. What about the volume of a liquid? Constant. Okay, so stuff you guys already know. We're just thinking about it a little bit differently. So you can take a liter of liquid from a bucket and pour it into a different sized bucket. You're still going to have a liter of liquid, but the shape is going to change. So if we're talking about that in terms of the attractive forces and the motion of the particles, okay, what do you think that means? It indicates, okay, so this is how we're using what we observe to create our theory, okay? It would indicate that the attractive forces between the particles now, are they stronger or weaker than a solid? Weaker. The attractive forces between the particles are weaker than those in a solid. Okay. And the motion of the particles, okay, is, I want to say fast enough. They have enough velocity so that they can move away from their neighbors, so that you can flow. So that this particle, okay, it can move away from the ones beside it, but the attractive forces between them sort of hold them together. So that's where you get the particles in a liquid being able to flow. Okay, the distance between them doesn't change, so we're not getting a different volume, but they're able to move. And that's because the attractive forces between the particles in a liquid are weaker. So the last one we have, okay, gases. Okay, gases, we're going to not draw that grid system because they don't exist in that nice little grid system because gases are free-flowing and everywhere. So pretty much for gases, you just draw some random circles, okay, which already is going to tell you about the properties of a gas. But we'll go through the same exercise. So the shape of a gas, constant or variable? Variable. The volume of a gas? Variable. Okay, given those two observations, which you guys already know about gases, what does that tell you about the strength of the attractive forces between the molecules? They're very, very weak. Okay? In fact, they exist, but they're negligible. Okay? Which means they're pretty much zero. Okay? So based on the rules of our theory, there is an attractive force between the particles of a gas, but they are so weak that they're pretty much negligible, non-existent. Okay? So we can say that the attractive forces between the particles in gases are negligible. I think I spelled that right. You guys are going to notice that I have fallen into the spell check trap. And there's just some words that I don't spell properly. And I'm sure it affects everybody. But I think I got negligible right. I think it might actually be an I here. So if there's ever a big scribble, so something looks like that, because I'm not quite sure which vowel to put there, and it's up for you guys to decide. Okay? That's how my notes work. If I scribble, it doesn't matter. Okay? Anyway, the attractive forces between the particles in a gas are negligible, and that's what gives it this variable shape and variable volume. So the particles in a gas have quite a bit of motion. Okay, they're flying around the room, but we could take a volume of gas and contain it in a very large cylinder, and it would just have a low pressure. Or we can take the same number of gas particles and put them in a small cylinder, and you would just have a higher pressure. Okay, so gases have a lot of motion of the particles, and we're going to go with they pretty much don't have any attractive forces. And so that's using kinetic molecular theory to describe the properties of solids, liquids, and gases. Okay. Now the last bit about temperature, so the textbook goes into this in a little bit more detail. What do we know about water, for example? Okay. And I had said that somewhere in there I said that the motion of the particles, the energy of the particles increases with temperature. Okay. So if we take solid water, which is ice, okay, we know that the ice is described in terms of attractive forces and the motion of the molecules. The molecules are moving, but the attractive forces are so strong that you have a constant shape and constant volume, and we end up with a solid. But if we increase the temperature, if we add energy to the system, we know that that solid is going to change phases and it's going to become a liquid. Why does it become a liquid? We're not changing the attractive forces between the particles, we're changing the motion of the particles. So we add energy, those particles are moving with a higher velocity, and they are able to break apart from its neighbor, okay, to overcome the attractive force and become a liquid. Same with a gas. We add yet more energy to the water. Okay. The particles in the water have more energy. They have more freedom of movement. They're moving at a higher velocity. And they can overcome the attractive forces in the liquid to become a gas state. Now, did you have a question? No? Okay. So that's how temperature works into the whole kinetic molecular theory. Temperature changes the motion of the molecules, not the attractive forces. So just so that's written down for you guys. Okay. So temperature, okay, or energy affects the motion of the particles. Okay, so we can say that the upwards arrow means increased temperature, with squiggly arrow means that'll give you increased velocity. Okay, you add energy, you increase the speed of the particles. So that's everything for kinetic molecular theory. I'm sorry for teaching on the first class, but I know that the information at the very first part is a little bit dry, so I wanted to get through it as much as possible. Next class, we're going to pick up with the periodic table and the particles, the subatomic particles in an atom. So that's all for today.